Thanks, everybody. Our MC is presenting next, so we thought that he couldn't kind of tell his own bio, so they kind of got me to do it. So welcome, everybody. So hopefully everybody's doing well and enjoying the conference, and there's a lot of online participation. So for everybody who has, my name, okay. My name is Huda Yusuf, and I live in the Boston area. I'm one of the youth, as I'm helping them out, and we were more than happy to put this together for everybody. So I'm glad everybody can make it, and this is yours. So and run with it. This dialogue is why we did this dialogue of you guys being the leaders, because you're here, you're participating, you have the ability to do social media. If you see what's going on around the world, you see that you guys are the future. So this is your opportunity to learn, and the workshop this morning was a great chance to learn a few things. So our next presenter is Abdinasir Egal, who is a great friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, who's also helping me out in the organization African Rights Monitor. He's a researcher. He actually just came back from a trip in Africa, Dadaab, where he saw the refugees and took a lot of stories from them, and he can tell you all about it tomorrow with our other friend Omar. But for now, he's going to talk about an initiative to help youth at risk in Somalia and to do the one thing that everybody here takes for granted, where it's lacking in a lot of areas in the world, which is education. So there's a great organization where another friend of ours who sadly couldn't be here today called Baro, which means in English, this is Somali, is either you learn or you help someone else learn. So this organization is Baro, which is an initiative preventing youth radicalization. So with a great welcome, please, Abdinasir Egal.
Thank you, Huda. Unfortunately, actually, a friend of ours is the one who started this initiative. He's out of town for a business and couldn't be here. I believe he would have described it much better than I do. This was a concept that he came up with, I believe, last year. Got us together, a group of us. As you would know, for the past 20 years in Somalia, the education system just went downhill, just like everything else. There are, however, a rudimentary educational system at the primary level, at the secondary level, and at the university level. There are several universities in Somalia. There's a University of Mogadishu, which amazingly actually operates in a place like Mogadishu where there's a war literally every day. There's University of Hargeisa, University of Puntland, and University of Amori University, which has a medical school, from what I understand, a good medical school. The purpose of this initiative was to connect students back home to people in the diaspora, perhaps to students in the diaspora. It was also to connect students within Somalia to each other. The purpose being Somalia has been segregated, balkanized, so there are different regions, and people are right now really, people don't interact as much as you used to. It's essentially not a one country now. So what we do, what the initiative does basically, it's essentially asking someone in the diaspora to sponsor a kid back home and to pay his or her tuition for a semester, for 2 semesters, or if you have to throughout their throughout their education in the university. So what we do is we ask students back home to apply through the website. Those of us in the diaspora who decided to take on this task would visit the website. You will randomly select some student from wherever they are. There are 4 universities that are involved, and that's Amud, Puntland State, Mogadishu, and Hargeisa. So students from those universities would apply. You will randomly pick somebody, and you will actually take the initiative to send the money, not to the student, but to the institution, and the student will let be known that your tuition has been paid for. And we would ask, and we would request the student to get connected to their sponsors, so that they know, this person paid for your tuition this semester, or throughout your school time there. And that way, there's a personal relationships. That's what we are trying to create. That person-to-person relationships. We also ask them if all the students that apply to this program, we ask them to connect to each other. So essentially, a student in Hargeisa would connect to a student in Mogadishu or Garowe or Boreme. That way, Somalis, the younger generation could at least know, okay, I might be in a stable part of the country, but at least I know, what's going on in Mogadishu and how hard the life is over there. So really, this is the gist of it. I will be distributing, I think I've gave it to most of the people, but I will be distributing this. I encourage you to check it. It's a great initiative. It's not, you don't really have to be, we would prefer that you commit, for the long time. But if you could even pay for one semester, for one student, that'll be great. And as it says, it's one student, one school at a time. And I hope we take these things for granted, going to universities, going to schools. You go to schools for free, you get financial aid or scholarships if you really did well at school, or your parents could afford to pay your school, and we take all this for granted. Somalis in Somalia, students like you at your age, don't have that luxury, and it's indeed a luxury to them. We take it for granted, and I encourage you to visit the website, just go through it, see what check it, see if you like it. And if you're up to it, sponsor a student back home in one of those universities, connect with them, and hopefully tell them, you're there. Yes, you're in the diaspora, but you know what they're going through, and you're willing to help. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please. The tuition is really not expensive by our standard. Most universities are between $100 to $200 per semester. So it's not really terribly expensive. And we are living in tough times in the States. I don't want to discount that. But some of us, we really spend that much money on Starbucks in a month. I know I do. So it's not something that's you'll have to dig deep and say, oh my. But it's very affordable. It's just between 100 to 200 for all the universities, so, and not too expensive. I think that's a larger question, and that depends on very much tied on the situation in Somalia and the overall, the Somalis coming together and figuring out what course of history do they want to take. We want to look back at 50 years and, and say, oh, there used to be a country called Somalia. And that does happen in history. It's nothing new. So it really depends what course, what path we want to take from here onwards. But I understand that these kids need opportunities back home. From what I understand, university students that graduated from Mahmoud actually went on what we call tahrib, and I think everybody knows that. Actually, living from Somalia to destinations in Europe, but going through difficult times, either dying on the way or dying in the sea. So I think that's a larger question, and each one of us have to ask ourselves. If I believe a semester is between 3 to 4 months. If I'm wrong, I'd like to be corrected. So it's not that different from over here, and it would usually be just more or less this, you spend the same many weeks as you would in universities here, and I don't think I completely understand your second question. You mean volunteering, actually going there to? As well, actually, they have been initiatives, but they're very loose and they scatter all over the place. But I know last event that Dr. Howell was here for us, and she was very kind enough to be here. What they're trying to do is to get students students that are universities here, especially nursing students, those in healthcare, to and actually I think I could connect you to Dr. Howe or her daughter. I think they were in the process of working on something like that, as to get students from the States or from Europe that are in the health field to go back home, hopefully in the safer areas, so they could train students in those communities, sort of like a capacity building or development program, and it will all be voluntary. And I don't know where that process is right now, but that's one of the initiatives Dr. Hawo and I think Amud Foundation and others were involved in. Well, yeah, this is a pilot program, so you gotta start somewhere. But also we gotta look at we look at the track record. You need to have a history. We cannot randomly say, okay, there's a university in so and so that we don't. These 4 universities do have a track record. People know people that work there. People know it's functioning well, and we know students actually do go there, sit down, and graduate from those universities. So number one, this was a pilot program, and I'm sure we will eventually expand it. Number two, those were the most identifiable universities that we were very sure these are functioning universities where students actually learn. And we had to ask ourselves that question because the education system in Somalia just went downhill like everything else. And we had to say, who are the people, leading these universities and what they do, and are students actually graduating, and these 4 universities were identified as being some of the, the better ones. I think that would be something that would be discussing. We will be discussing, I think, because I know that will be something we'll have to discuss with the institution. Now we just more of a person to person, and we do interact with institutions in the sense that we send the money not to the student. We send the money directly to the institution. Tell them, this is their tuition, and we tell the student that your tuition has been paid for. But that's something in the pipeline, I think. Yeah, and yeah, and at the very least, build a library where there's a number of books. I think I understand what you mean, and I think some universities actually do that, and some universities actually have a relationships with the universities outside. But I think if you mean in terms of capacity building and in terms of getting students from Somalia to come to universities here, I think that's on a limited basis. I know some schools do have relationship with schools back home in Somalia, but I don't think it's not a well-established relationship. Maybe it's something the diaspora, those of us here, could start working on, not just people back home, university administrators back home trying to come to the States or Europe to ask for help. That we could be more proactive and help them that way.
Enrolled in one or all of those 4 universities?
I believe to be enrolled in those universities, you will have to, number one, graduate from an institution that they recognize in terms of high schools and secondary schools. And number two, I believe in northern Somalia, which is called Somaliland, they do have a, what do you call, like, what is the exam you have to give when you graduate from here? For those of you that went to high school here. SATs, yes. Thank you. I didn't went to high school here, so. I do believe they have something like an SAT and that you have to take, and you need a certification from that. and also a certification from the government saying, you know, this is student went through the process, and you know, this is they're eligible to go to university. But again, it's a country that doesn't have a real good government, so I would imagine there will be cases of, you know, students that might not necessarily be ready to be in a university, you know, going through the system. But for most part, I think they do have a, you know, a decent, reliable, if anything, vetting process to see who's actually, you know, who could make it through the university. Okay, I think that was the last question. Thank you.